Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on quite a complex and deeply human exploration. We're looking into Filipino attitudes toward Black individuals.
Hmm.
You know, the Philippines holds this incredible reputation for warmth, for hospitality, a nation really famous for its open arms. But it leads to a really interesting question. How does that renowned openness truly extend to everyone, especially, people of color? And in this dive, specifically Black individuals, it's definitely not a simple story, and we're going to try and untangle its many threads today.
Yeah, and that's exactly the mission here. We want to peel back the layers, really examine the cultural, the historical, and those deeply personal factors that have shaped these attitudes. We'll be looking at the powerful role of media, the impact of limited real-world exposure,
Yeah.
and also the sometimes unseen biases that can exist. It's not about finding a single yes or no answer, not at all. It's really about understanding these nuances to hopefully pave the way for a more inclusive society. It's a journey that requires a thoughtful approach.
Definitely. So let's unpack that unique Filipino context first. I mean, when we talk about the Philippines, we're talking about an archipelago. 7,641 islands, home to over 110 million people. It's often celebrated as a melting pot, right? A global hub known for being incredibly open to foreigners. On paper, it sounds like the absolute epitome of welcoming. But what's the reality when we look maybe a little closer?
It does sound incredibly welcoming, and look, for many people it genuinely is. But what's fascinating here is how that welcoming nature can sometimes be tested or perhaps questioned when it comes to people of color, particularly Black individuals. And to understand this, you absolutely have to look at the country's colonial past. Just imagine over 300 years under Spanish rule, and then right after nearly 50 years of American occupation. These weren't just political shifts. They profoundly reshaped Filipino culture. They embedded Eurocentric beauty standards and racial hierarchies that maybe surprisingly still echo today.
Wow. 300 years of Spanish rule, nearly 50 years American. That's a significant amount of time for cultural values to really shift and embed themselves. Can you give us a concrete example? Like, how do those lingering colonial values manifest today, especially concerning perceptions of race?
Absolutely. I think the most striking example really is the booming market for skin whitening products in the Philippines. We're talking about a staggering uh, $500 million annual market.
Yeah.
500 million. Now, this isn't just about personal aesthetics. It's a direct reflection of those internalized colonial values. It subtly, yet quite powerfully, marginalizes darker-skinned individuals. How? By associating lightness with desirability, with beauty. It's a message that just permeates society, often without people even realizing the historical roots. But, and this is important, it's crucial to remember that this historical lens, while foundational, is only one piece of the puzzle. Contemporary influences play just as significant a role, maybe even more so day to day.
Right. And when we talk about contemporary influences, one of the most powerful has to be media, doesn't it? I mean,
Mm.
Hollywood films, American TV shows, global pop culture, they don't just exist in the Philippines. They absolutely dominate what people watch and consume.
They don't just dominate, they really shape perceptions in a profound way. Especially, and this is key, when real-world exposure to diverse populations is limited. What's truly problematic is that in so much of this imported media, Black individuals are often pigeonholed, stuck in incredibly narrow, stereotypical roles. So often you see them portrayed as athletes, musicians, or, disturbingly often, as criminals. And these limited, often negative portrayals, well, they're consumed by millions of Filipinos, and they inevitably reinforce existing biases.
So it's not just that the stereotypes exist, but they kind of fill a void, right? Where direct experience might otherwise offer a different picture. I think I saw a statistic about this.
Exactly. There's a very compelling 2019 University of the Philippines study that highlighted this very thing. It found that a remarkable 68% of Filipino respondents associated Black people with specific, often narrow stereotypes like, being basketball players or gang members. And what's crucial here is that this was directly attributed to media exposure, despite their very limited real-world contact. This limited real-world exposure compounds the issue significantly. The Black population in the Philippines, it's quite small. We're talking only a few thousand African residents, mostly students or expatriates. So for many Filipinos, their only interaction with Black people truly is through screens.
So it creates this sort of self-reinforcing echo chamber. If your only window into a whole group of people is through this narrow, often caricatured media lens, that lens quickly becomes your truth. Is that fair to say?
Precisely. It creates this unfortunate feedback loop. Limited exposure leads to an over-reliance on media stereotypes, which in turn perpetuates prejudice. And you see it reflected in linguistic subtleties too. For instance, the term Negro in Tagalog. Now, while it's not always intended maliciously, it can certainly carry negative connotations. This often reflects a lack of cultural sensitivity that is, well, often rooted more in ignorance than overt racism, born from that very lack of authentic exposure we talked about.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I think, because despite those powerful influences, media, history, there's a crucial counterpoint. The transformative power of personal experience. It turns out that actual direct interactions can profoundly challenge and reshape these attitudes.
They absolutely can. And we have compelling examples of positive encounters that stand in really stark contrast to those media-driven biases.
Yeah.
Think about Filipino overseas workers, right?
Yeah.
In places like the United States or the Middle East, many share stories of genuine friendship, mutual respect, shared humanity with their Black colleagues. Or, another example, consider African students residing in cities like Manila or Davao. They often recount instances of incredible kindness, being welcomed into local communities, sometimes even invited to cultural events, almost like family.
So these anecdotes aren't just isolated feel-good stories then. There's actual psychological theory behind why these personal connections are so powerful.
Yes, exactly. These anecdotes beautifully illustrate something called social contact theory. This theory, and it's supported by numerous studies, including from the American Psychological Association, suggests that meaningful direct interactions with diverse groups actively reduce bias. Why? By humanizing the other. Now, in a country like the Philippines, where, over 85% of the population identifies as ethnically Malay, opportunities for such direct interactions with Black individuals are relatively limited. But when they do occur, their impacts can be immense. For example, there were community programs in Quezon City that specifically paired Filipino youth with African exchange students, and they showed measurable reductions in prejudiced attitudes. Participants reported greater empathy, increased openness after these direct interactions. It really highlights the power of connection.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the bigger picture? Because one of the most critical and maybe surprising revelations here is that many Filipinos might actually be unaware of their own biases. They're often masked by this deeply ingrained cultural narrative, right, of being inherently tolerant and hospitable.
That's such a crucial point. It's often an unseen bias, really interwoven with the fabric of daily life. Socialization plays a huge role here, starting right from childhood. Filipinos are exposed constantly to beauty standards that consistently prioritize lighter skin, straight hair, more Western features. You see it everywhere: ads, local media, even just casual conversations. These standards subtly but very effectively devalue darker skin tones, including those associated with Black individuals. It contributes to an unconscious bias over time, again, often not about malice, but about a deeply ingrained aesthetic preference that has real-world implications.
And it's not just about beauty standards either, is it? It's also about how maybe casual remarks can normalize prejudice without people even realizing it.
Precisely. Casual remarks or jokes about race.
Yeah.
They're surprisingly common in some Filipino social circles, and these can normalize prejudice without people fully grasping their impact. Like, for example, comments about looking African used as a kind of jab at someone's appearance. It might seem harmless to the speaker, but it can perpetuate really harmful stereotypes. There was a 2021 survey by social weather stations that revealed 62% of Filipinos admitted to making or hearing race-based remarks in casual settings. But here's the kicker. Only 25% of those recognize these remarks as potentially offensive.
Wow, only 25%.
Yeah, that's a significant awareness gap. It truly underscores the need for greater education, more self-reflection to confront these biases head-on. It's almost like the very virtues that define Filipino culture, that warmth, that hospitality, can paradoxically obscure these unseen biases. It makes it challenging to recognize when intent doesn't match impact.
And these unseen biases, they obviously have real-world implications. They extend beyond individual interactions to the broader fabric of Filipino society. We're talking about issues like discrimination in employment, maybe housing for African expatriates, which, frankly, undermines the Philippines' reputation as a truly globalized, welcoming nation.
Absolutely. And addressing these deep-seated attitudes, well, it requires a multi-pronged approach. There's no single silver bullet. Education is fundamental. Integrating modules on diversity, on anti-racism into school curricula can foster early awareness, critical thinking. Media literacy programs are also crucial, empowering Filipinos to critically analyze the portrayals they consume, to challenge stereotypes directly. Community initiatives, like those cultural exchange programs we mentioned, can significantly increase direct exposure, breaking down barriers through personal connections. And finally, robust public discourse, whether it's through social media, forums, broader campaigns, is essential to normalize discussions about racism and encourage Filipinos to confront biases openly.
It sounds like a lot of work, definitely. But Are there signs of progress? Or is this still very much an uphill battle?
There are definitely signs of progress, and it's encouraging to see. Social media platforms, particularly X, have been pretty instrumental in amplifying voices calling out racism in the Philippines. You see hashtags like #StopAsianHate, sparking local conversations about prejudice and extending that empathy perhaps to other groups. Grassroots organizations like the Philippine Anti-Discrimination Alliance are actively advocating for inclusivity, providing safe spaces for minorities, including Black residents. Even some universities like Ateneo de Manila have begun introducing courses on global diversity and human rights, directly addressing issues like anti-Black bias and promoting critical thinking among students. So movement is happening.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and for the path forward? Well, building a more inclusive Philippines really demands a collective effort. It's not just one group's job. It starts with acknowledging that racism, in its subtle and maybe more overt forms, is a real issue. Public campaigns, supported by influencers and community leaders, can truly help normalize these conversations about bias, encouraging that crucial self-reflection. Then we need policy changes. Things like robust anti-discrimination laws with clear enforcement mechanisms to provide real legal recourse for victims of prejudice, and, critically, increasing authentic and diverse representation of Black individuals in local media. That could fundamentally shift cultural perceptions over time, humanizing those who've been stereotyped.
And as individuals, you listening also play a vital role. It's not just about big systems. You can challenge your own biases by actively seeking out diverse perspectives, maybe through travel, online platforms, community engagement, whatever works for you. Simply listening to the experiences of Black individuals in the Philippines, like African students or expatriates, can powerfully humanize the issue and foster deeper empathy and understanding. And finally, supporting organizations that promote inclusivity, like NGOs focused on minority rights, can amplify efforts to create systemic change. Every conversation, truly, every shared story, contributes to that shift.
So there you have it. The question of Filipino attitudes toward Black individuals isn't simple, is it? It's deeply intertwined with the nation's famed hospitality, yes, but also with complex cultural influences, those pervasive media stereotypes, and the really transformative power of personal experiences. And while those personal interactions certainly offer a lot of hope, addressing the systemic issues like socialization and that persistent awareness gap requires broader solutions. If you found this deep dive insightful, and we hope you did, you can visit Mind Expansion Daily for more great information just like this. We'd also really love for you to like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily. It helps us keep bringing you these deep dives. And please challenge yourself to leave a comment with your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree with our summary of this complex topic? We want to hear from you. Also, maybe share the location you were from. Our goal is to increase our reach worldwide. This journey ultimately begins with confronting uncomfortable truths and committing to change one conversation at a time.